The far-right alliance claims victory in Italy. Giorgia Meloni is set to become the country's first female prime minister and form Italy's most right-wing government since World War II. But with record low voter turnout, is this really what Italians want? And how will Europe react? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is Italy's election. With some 26% of the vote, it's a clear win for Giorgia Meloni and her far-right Brothers of Italy party. Sharing in that victory are her conservative coalition partners, Matteo Salvini's League, and of course, Silvio Berlusconi's Forza Italia. Together, they'll hold just under half the seats in parliament. The results show a remarkable rise for Meloni after taking only 4% of the vote back in 2018. The country's stark shift toward the right has sparked concern among some citizens. But in typical fashion of newly elected leaders, Meloni says her party will govern for all and called for unity to tackle Italy's many challenges.
If we are called to govern this nation, we will do it for all Italians. We will do it with the aim of uniting people, of enhancing what unites them, rather than what divides them.
So who is Giorgia Meloni? Well, the 45-year-old began her career in politics at the age of 15. She won her first election at 21 and became Italy's youngest ever minister just 10 years later under Silvio Berlusconi. She's a founding member of the Brothers of Italy party, which many accuse of being a throwback to the fascist leadership of Benito Mussolini. Now, Meloni was able to successfully transform her party from what many saw as neo-fascists on the fringes to a mainstream conservative group. She has voiced support for the West's policy in Ukraine while promising to crack down hard on immigration and reduce taxes. Now, it's still not clear just how strong her coalition will prove to be or if internal division will bring down this government as it has so many others before.
What can I say? Unfortunately, first polls are clear, and it seems that the center-right won over the center-left. An uncertain future awaits us.
Well, I am not a Brothers of Italy voter, so I can't be happy. In my opinion, the center-right government won't last that long. I think there is too many internal divisions between Forza Italia, the League, and Brothers of Italy. So I don't think this government will last that long.
Back in July, Italy's president, Sergio Mattarella, dissolved parliament and called an early election after Prime Minister Mario Draghi resigned. He quit one day after 3 government coalition partners refused to back his vote of confidence. Draghi eventually won, but their decision was enough to prompt his resignation. And much to the chagrin of the EU, that opened the door of opportunity to Italy's far right. Germany's ruling Social Democrat Party has said Meloni's win would not be good for European cooperation, citing her support for anti-democratic figures, including Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban. So to talk more about what led to this victory and what it could change for Italy and the EU are from Verona, Paolo Borchia. He's a member of the European Parliament with Italy's right-wing League Party and a member of the Identity and Democracy Group. From Rome is Lia Quartapelle. She is an Italian MP with the Democratic Party and a member of the Committee on Foreign and European Community Affairs. And also from the Italian capital is journalist Alan Friedman, a biographer and author of My Way, Berlusconi in his own words. Thanks all so much for being with us. Alan, I'll start with you and ask first about Italian voters who delivered record apathy in this election, about 64% in a country that's usually far more enthusiastic about the voting process. But the winner is still the winner. Is this what a majority of Italians really want, to return to the first far-right government since World War II?
Well, let's try and put this in perspective. The biggest winner of this election was the 35% of Italians who did not vote. So if they were a party, they would be the party of no voting. The second biggest winner of the 65% of Italians who did vote was Meloni with 26%. But Meloni's partners, Salvini from the Lega and Berlusconi from Forza Italia got about 8% each. Salvini got a bit more, 8.9%. Berlusconi about 8%. And these three parties together have only 43, 44%, so not a majority, but under the Italian election law, they get a majority in the parliament as a result, and also because the center left was splintered, fragmented. Part of them were with Enrico Letta, who did not very well in this election, only got 19%. And part of them were with the confused populists of the Five Star Movement, who were promising free money and guaranteed lifetime incomes for people who in the South mainly, and they got 15%. So a fragmented vote, but enough to give the right a majority in parliament. And so Meloni will be the next government, and we'll have to see what happens inside that government, because she does not have easy relations with either Berlusconi or Salvini. So we start with a disunited center-right coalition.
Right. I want to talk more about that. What many are saying are divisions already within what will be the governing coalition. But first, let me ask Paolo what you think of the victory here. And as Alan was saying, it might be a victory, but it's still kind of a loss to the 35% indifference and apathetic voters that actually form the majority of this vote.
Yes, but actually, this is a data that should be that should be assessed very carefully. The matter is that in this historical era, Italian people, notably young people, don't feel represented by politics. And well, the matter is that we have the highest quota of electors that decided to avoid to decide, and they decide to delegate to other people to be represented, and that's a pity. That's a pity. But definitely, I think that the next government, the forthcoming government, should have, in my opinion, a very humble approach, because we are expected by an autumn and a winter very difficult because of the rise of energy prices, and personally, I'm very frightened by the social emergency that Italy could face in the forthcoming months. That's why I think that the cohesion among the center-right wing coalition will be the priority for the first weeks, starting from the very beginning of the new government experience.
Okay, let me ask Lia then. I mean, we hear Paolo expecting cohesion because of the challenges that are especially coming this winter. I mean, how well do you think this coalition will work together? At the very least, they are more or less properly ideologically aligned, are they not?
Well, I don't want to be an all waiting for problems of the coalition to happen. I think the vote was clear. This coalition has to be in government. They have to prove what they can do. They govern in this form of coalition a lot of towns, a lot of regions. So it is an experienced coalition. Even if at the national level, they haven't been in government together for many years, and they showed a different approach to both international affairs, especially the war in Ukraine, and European affairs, which will be the big tests. But I mean, it's not for us to hope or to desire that the coalition will not work. They have to prove whether they can work despite the differences that are visible.
Okay, let me come back to Ellen then, because we're hearing that in many ways they are an experienced coalition, but we know that no Italian government has really lasted more than a year. So why don't you really expect this one to be too different?
Well, I think there is a possibility that this government will collapse in a year or two. They would obviously like to rule for 5 years. That would be their ideal scenario. But let's remember that we have a government where Giorgia Meloni, the far-right extremist, a leader who is more right-wing than Marine Le Pen in France, and who sympathizes with Steve Bannon, the American Trump official who is currently being tried for corruption and who is the architect of Trump's identity politics and has supported the white supremacists. And Meloni has borrowed some of the Trump playbook in Italy, trying to imply that we don't want to be substituted by people of color, although she never really says it directly. She has gone against abortion, although she says she will keep the abortion law. But we know that where her government, her party rules in Italy, they ignore the abortion law. And she has attacked gay people, saying she's tired of the LGBT lobby. And her own cultural affairs spokesperson said just 2 days ago, a homosexual couple is illegal in Italy. So there's a very right-wing social bent there. On the economic front, I think Meloni will try her best to be serious because she has 200 billion euros that Draghi managed to design as a plan and cooperate with Europe to implement. 200 billion euros that can modernize the Italian economy, that can finance the digitalization of the country, the ecological transition, infrastructure. And Europe has been very clear. Ursula von der Leyen has warned that if the reforms don't go ahead, they will take the money away. Now, already the head of the party that Borchia supports, Matteo Salvini,
is the same rule for every country, not only for Italy.
If I can finish,
same rules for every country.
I understand your passion, but just to finish my sentence, the party that Mr. Borchia supports, the Lega, has insulted Ursula von der Leyen, and Salvini called her squalid a few days ago and was very angry that she warned that if Italy became an illiberal authoritarian democracy like Orban's Hungary or Poland, that the European Commission has tools to deal with such people. And this was seen as a warning by the European Commission. Salvini attacked the European Commission in reply. My concern is not the beginning. I think Meloni will be very careful to work with Draghi. They're already asking for Draghi's help to keep the economy going because we are facing an energy emergency, high inflation, rising interest rates, and war in Europe.
Okay.
So there's a lot on the table.
There's a lot on the table, and Paolo,
yes,
before you go on, I just want to listen quickly, actually, to what Ursula von der Leyen had to say, because I know you actually had a strong response on Twitter. So this was in response to when she was asked about Italy's election just a few days ago and whether the outcome could affect EU funding. Let me just play that first, and then, Paolo, I'll get your response.
We'll see. If things go in a difficult direction, I've spoken about Hungary and Poland, we have tools. If things go in the right direction, and people as a body that is always, where always governments have to be accountable to, play an important role.
Right. Paolo, some saw that as a veiled threat to Italy. What did you think?
Well, I think Mrs. von der Leyen's words were very inappropriate just a few days before the Italian vote. So she should be more careful. Let's avoid to talk to Giorgia Meloni needs to be careful. Well, I think that those kind of words are creating a very long distance between European Commission and European people. That's why I was very astonished when I read first Ursula von der Leyen's statement, and secondly when I heard the speech. At the very beginning, I didn't want to believe that she was so inappropriate in order to express herself in those words. I think that Poland is Poland, Hungary is Hungary, Italy is Italy. Different people, different democratic systems, and so it's not very nice to have a look to the Commission that takes some position when some governments are not part of the left-wing family win election in different European countries. That's it.
But Lia, you know, Matteo Salvini also warned Ursula von der Leyen not to intervene in domestic politics, he said. But domestic politics are EU politics when you are an EU member country?
Well, I would urge the new majority to do something that is very good for Italy, which is to implement the National Recovery Plan. They spent a lot of time in the electoral campaign explaining and inventing, to an extent, the fact that the National Recovery Plan could be redrawn. Which is an immense waste of time and energy for a country like Italy that badly needs investment resources that were approved by all parties in parliament, excluding Giorgia Meloni's party, which abstained. It would be shameful if the new government would change what was decided just a few months ago. So that's the main point. I wouldn't call into the dispute European authorities. The new majority has a lot of accountability to show to the people that have voted them, and I would like them in action. I mean, this is democracy. They think they can do better than the previous government. We want to see them, if they can really do better, not rewrite something that was approved, which is something very different. The implementation of the National Recovery Plan, as Alan Friedman knows well, is an immense task for the country. We want to see it implemented. We voted for it. Lega voted for it. Forza Italia voted for it. Meloni abstained. She didn't vote against. So we want to see the plan implemented, not rewritten.
Right, Ellen, I mean, yeah, go ahead, Ellen. Because it feels like this coalition now wants to see if they can have it both ways. They can be, EU, stay out of our affairs, but yeah, we still want your money and we want exactly what the previous government that we reject made a deal for.
Yeah, I don't want to do an Italian lesson, but there's a lovely idiom in Italian that says, vogliamo la moglie ubriaca e la botta piena, which translated into English would be Meloni and her right-wingers want to have their cake and eat it too.
Right.
Meaning they would like to make the appearance of rewriting the PNRR, calling into question all these things, and yet they want to benefit from the money. But Meloni and Salvini have been enemies of modernization reforms in the last year or two. And Salvini voted against the fiscal reform that Draghi proposed just before the election. They've opposed the reforms of competition laws concerning beach concessions. And basically, what you have with Salvini and the Lega is a long history of opposing pension reforms. They were against the Fornero reform. They've wasted tens of billions of euros of money spending on rolling back reforms. And the OECD basically perceives Salvini as an anti-reform politician. So how do you get the money from Europe, if you're Giorgia Meloni, when some of your coalition members are against the reforms that are needed to get the money? That's going to be the big challenge.
Paolo,
if they cooperate and suddenly she's changed, because remember, Giorgia Meloni was, like Salvini, an anti-Euro, anti-Europe politician until just 2 or 3 years ago. So if they've changed, that's good news for Italy and for Europe.
If they've changed. Paolo, go ahead.
I would be happy if my left-wing friends could be more humble and recognize that at the global level, European Union is the economic region that had the worst performances in last years from the GDP side, from the growth. And so if we are not humble and we don't think that we should we should provide with new approaches, new solutions, I think that we are only talking about the theory, but we are not providing concrete results to citizens. That's why, just to make it clear, the PNRR is very complex to manage, but don't forget that Next Generation EU was conceived at the beginning of the breakout of the pandemic in order to give a reply. The historical era is changing. We need different approaches. We have new challenges to be solved, and in my opinion, at least we should be able to reflect on the way to to see the PNRR better implemented.
Okay.
So I'm not understanding why we should think in a not very flexible way on the use of this instrument.
Yes, Alan, let me give you a quick response, and then I'd like to get back to Lia. Go ahead.
Sure. This is the kind of talk that will put Rome on a collision course with the European Commission. Because they say, oh, it was written during the COVID era, therefore we need to change it. A member of Mr. Borchia's Lega party, a man called Claudio Borghi, said we should take the ecological transition plan and dump it in the ocean. It's rubbish. So when you have that kind of hostility against the transition, the ecological transition, he said that publicly a few weeks ago.
Actually, you are talking about the main reason for high prices of bills.
Well, we can get into an
so
analysis.
You think that the Green Deal, the approach of ecological transition is perfect? You know that European
I don't
Union
think TRT World wants us to debate the ecological transition plan.
We can't get too inside baseball, as we would say.
Too micro, inside baseball.
Exactly. Even that won't be understood by most of our international audience. Let me come back to Lia, though. Lia, I'm going to ask you kind of a rather blunt question. I mean, I'm not saying this would be your forecast for what would happen, but what is the worst case scenario here? If this government goes ahead with what people most cynically, but perhaps realistically, think they want to do as a far-right leadership?
Well, honestly, we have to do a bit of self-critique. We've been punished by the voters because we've been the adult in the room. So no great plan and no great dream. While Lega, Fratelli d'Italia, Forza Italia in the past have made the voters dream that another reality was possible. Fine enough. Now I think they have to grow up. They have to show that there are limits, there are constraints to the action of a government.
Maybe it's better if the Democratic Party thinks to grow up by yourself.
Let Lia finish quickly, and I'll come back to you, Paolo. Lia, go ahead.
I mean, you see what happens. If you say that the right wing has to behave like an adult, they jump up. I mean, I think they'll have to be in government. They'll have to show whether they can do what they promise, they can deliver within the limits of the action of any government. And I mean, if you borrow money or if you get money from an outside body that graciously gives you 80 billion euros for free, plus 100 and plus as a grant with low interest rate, you'll have to stand up to certain conditions. And I mean, they'll have to show that they're grown up, that they're adults, that they know how the game is played.
And if they don't, what happens to Italy? Not just economically, but also the social fabric. I'll let you speak quickly, Lia, and then Paolo, I'll come back to you. Go ahead.
If they don't, they waste an immense opportunity of investment for our country. If they stick to the ideology of we know how to do it better rather than Europe, which is very childish, they waste a huge opportunity for the country. I hope that we realize that adult life is a life within boundaries.
Paolo, go ahead.
Well, it's very strange that you got lessons from the losers of elections. Well, I don't want to be rude, but frankly speaking, I expected a humble approach by Democratic Party. You weren't able to get the confidence of your electors, and so well, frankly speaking, I thought to face something different today. But by the way, it's up to you. It's not my issue.
Okay, Paolo, but what are you going to do going forward? That was the question. Not about who's won. You're in charge now. Now what?
Well, first of all, everyone is perfectly aware that this country needs strong reforms, and in this direction, I'm not scared to modernize the country. I think that good ideas could come from Rome, from regions, from Brussels. It's a common sense issue. I'm the less ideological people in this world because I think ideology is a passion, but we should be concrete because we have a lot of money to invest. In my opinion, too much money because if you speak with local authorities, with small municipalities, everyone is saying, well, we have a lot of money we have a lot of money to invest, but we don't have sometimes the personnel to deal with this matter. That's why, I'm sorry, I'm concluding. That's why I think that it wasn't, in my opinion, a good idea to accept all the loan parts by the Democratic Party and Five Stars government.
Sorry.
Very quickly, Lia, 10 seconds.
Point. I think we have to be self-critical, but I think also the Lega has to be self-critical. We confirmed almost the same votes. We confirmed also the same votes as 5 years ago, while the Lega halved their support.
10 seconds, Alan, just quick final words. I know 10 seconds is nothing, but go ahead. Alan, please finish.
Quick final word. Quick final word. Quick yes/no answer for Mr. Borchia. Does your right-wing Lega party intend to break your formal alliance with Vladimir Putin's party in Russia, or do you intend to keep that once you're in the government of Italy? Will you keep being allied with this dictator?
Yes or no?
I didn't expect that one guest make questions to other guests, but
we're going to have an entirely separate show on the foreign policy of this new government going forward. Very unfortunately, I'm going to have to leave it there because we're completely out of time for this edition of the Newsmakers. I'd really like to thank all three of my panelists so much for being with us. So much more to talk about. I'm sure we will in the near future. Remember, our viewers, you can follow us on Twitter and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.